Alright, Shalom. I want to start off by giving all praise, honor, and glory due to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem Rakakwadash. I'd like to give double honors unto the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone, who our land is true from, and I'd like to say peace and salutations unto the hopefully elect. And this is going to be a part 2, to the video that I did yesterday, entitled The Weapons of His Indignation. Pretty much going into, those nuclear missiles, which is going to be used, to destroy America, ultimately. So, Lord willing, this lesson is edifying and straight to the point, and this is another video, showing how, these missiles or nuclear weapons work in general, So, for the sake of YouTube, I'm using this video for fair use purposes.
Since their first devastating use back in 1945, nuclear weapons have been a huge source of anxiety and fear across the globe. For almost a century now, we've lived in the knowledge that our world leaders could plunge us into nuclear war with destruction on a scale never before seen in history. But how likely really is this scenario? What was the biggest nuclear weapon ever dropped? And how does a nuke even work anyway? Slip your hazmat suit on and brace yourself for impact, because you're about to get hit with a fat knowledge bomb. Let's start with a little history and ask the question, why were nuclear bombs ever developed in the first place? In 1938, just a year before the world was plunged into war, German scientist Otto Hahn was working in a lab in Berlin when he discovered something incredible: nuclear energy. By splitting the nucleus of an atom, the smallest unit of matter in the known universe, Hahn realized a monumental amount of energy was released. After word got out about his findings, U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt was worried that the Germans would use this newfound energy to develop a superweapon. So, he asked U.S. scientists to develop one first. When America joined World War II in December 1941, these efforts were doubled, and Roosevelt established the Manhattan Project. Based in Manhattan, New York, the project was a joint effort by the military and several hundred scientists to weaponize nuclear energy. Just 4 years after its formation, its goal was met. On the 16th of July, 1945, the U.S. conducted the first ever test of a nuclear bomb, codenamed the Trinity Test. The bomb, containing 1 kiloton of destructive power, that's the same as 1,000 tons of conventional explosives, was dropped from a plane over Socorro, New Mexico.
The baby's in danger. What is this T-Rex going to do to it?
The resulting explosion stunned the U.S. military and left the bomb site so irradiated that even today, the area contains more than 10 times the normal level of background radiation. In other words, it was a resounding success. Less than a month later, the U.S. would put this terrifying new technology to horrific use. With the war almost over, but Japan refusing to surrender, newly instated President Harry S. Truman ordered the atomic bombing of the city of Hiroshima. When the bomb named Little Boy was dropped, everything changed. The plane chosen for the mission, a B-29 Superfortress bomber called the Enola Gay, reached Hiroshima at 9:14 a.m. local time on the 6th of August, 1945. The bombardier, Thomas Farabee, dropped the near 10,000-pound bomb. Then the pilot, Paul Tibbets, sharply turned and flew away from the city as fast as he could. 43 seconds later, Little Boy exploded with the force of more than 16,500 tons of TNT. The nuclear explosion instantly vaporized anyone at its center, scorched the ground around it to temperatures hotter than 7,000 degrees Fahrenheit, and sent a shockwave that smashed through buildings and obliterated land for miles around. It was hell on Earth. A daunting mushroom cloud soared in the air 20,000 feet above the city, blocking out sunlight to those below. But still, the Japanese Emperor Hirohito refused to back down. Surprised but unperturbed, Truman ordered the dropping of a second bomb, this time over the city of Nagasaki. This bomb, named Fat Man, was even bigger and more powerful than its predecessor. Just 3 days after the bombing of Hiroshima, Fat Man fell from a U.S. plane and exploded over Nagasaki, obliterating over 2.5 square miles of the city. A second mushroom cloud was thrust high into the air, and radioactive rain burned down on anyone unfortunate enough to have survived the initial blast. Yeah, you might have been better off being vaporized than being a little further out when the bomb went off. Those not in the immediate blast suffered all kinds of nasty maladies, like burns, internal injuries, and blindness, and many succumbed to them. Emperor Hirohito, seeing such destruction, finally announced the country's surrender. At the cost of over 200,000 innocent lives, the Allies had won the war. Perhaps unsurprisingly, the newly formed United Nations made one of their first acts to call for the elimination of atomic weapons. And even less unsurprisingly, this was completely ignored. In the years following the war, the U.S. continued testing atomic bombs, and the Soviet Union, under communist rule and firmly against the American way of life, accelerated their own nuclear program. In 1949, the Soviet Union became the second nation to successfully detonate a nuclear bomb. The Cold War had officially begun. Two nations with wildly conflicting belief systems, both harboring the most powerful weapons mankind had ever seen. What could possibly go wrong? You know where you can't go wrong, though, hitting those like and sub. In 1952, 3 years after the Soviet Union's first successful nuclear test, and with Cold War tensions rising ever higher, the U.S. took nuclear weaponry to a whole new level by detonating the first ever hydrogen bomb. Can you guess how much more powerful this hydrogen bomb was than the OG atom bombs? 10 times? 100 times? Nope, it was 1,000 times more powerful than the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. Or when obliterating an entire city just isn't enough. When the bomb exploded over a remote Pacific island, it did so with the monumental force of 10.4 megatons of TNT. That's over 10 million tons of the stuff. The colossal blast made a fireball at least 4 miles wide that, by expert estimates, shone brighter than 1,000 suns, and the heat was felt by observers standing as far as 30 miles away.
Yes, I'm going to stop it right there for a second. And I'm going to bring out the book of Malachi, chapter 4 and verse 1. And it says, "For behold, the day cometh that shall burn as an oven. All the proud, yea, and all that do wickedly shall be stubble. And the day cometh that shall burn them up, saith the Lord of hosts, that it shall leave them neither root nor branch." And yes, now this guy is pretty much describing, the nuclear test that took place, in the Pacific in the 1950s, pretty much the devastation of what that one hydrogen bomb could do, and they said they could see the fireball or feel the heat from the fireball. It's lucky they could feel the heat from the fireball from 30 miles away. So, that goes to show you that, these weapons, they're going to burn hot, extremely hot, So, continuing on.
But the Soviets were hot on the U.S.'s tail, and if you thought what you just saw was big, strap yourselves in because you've seen nothing yet. Let's put things into perspective for a moment. The bomb dropped on Hiroshima was 15 kilotons. The first hydrogen bomb was 10 megatons. But 9 years later, in 1961, the Soviets tested a hydrogen bomb that was an unbelievable 57 megatons. That's 3,800 times the power of the bomb that destroyed Hiroshima. The absolute behemoth of a weapon was called the Tsar Bomba, and measured in at 26 feet long as well as weighing 27 metric tons. about 6 times the weight of Little Boy and over twice the length. The monstrous superweapon was so big that it didn't even fit inside a plane and had to be carried underneath instead. You've got a feel for the poor pilot. He and his crew were only given a 50-50 chance of surviving the test. On October 30th, 1961, the plane carrying the bomb took off and flew towards the test site, an island in the Arctic Ocean named Novaya Zemlya. Once over the island, the crew released the payload and got the hell out of there as fast as they could. To give them more time, the enormous explosive had been fitted with a parachute to slow its descent. Even so, when it detonated, the blast was so powerful that its shockwave slammed into the plane, sending it plummeting over 3,000 feet.
Пулевой столб, поднимающийся с земли, быстро увеличился в объеме. Через несколько секунд после взрыва.
Luckily, the pilot recovered control, but the explosion annihilated everything within 22 miles and created a massive mushroom cloud over 37 miles high. The bomber's crew, still hurtling away as fast as they could, watched as the beautiful, terrifying plume pierced the sky where they'd been mere moments before. In reality, the test was nothing more than Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev flexing his military muscle to show the U.S. who was boss. But the bomb itself, while undoubtedly impressive, was impractical and wasn't as effective as dropping several smaller bombs. So no attempt by either side was ever made to make one bigger. Even today, the Tsar Bomba remains the biggest nuclear weapon ever created and used, though I came pretty close to topping it after last night's curry. Despite no single bomb ever matching the Tsar Bomba's power, between 1945 and 1980, a combined total of 510 megatons of explosives were detonated around the world in nuclear tests. That's 170 times more blast power than was used in the whole of World War II. And though easily the two biggest culprits, it wasn't just the US and Soviet Union that were responsible for the barrage of blasts. By 1980, the UK, France, and China had all waded into the fray with their own tests, albeit on a far smaller scale. With 5 nations all blowing the living daylights out of any barren patch of land they could find, you might expect there to be some environmental consequences, right? Well, we can't be sure just how much radioactive material has been flung up into the atmosphere from the decades of testing, but we know it's a lot. Like, a lot. And what goes up must come down. Throughout the Cold War, one of the Soviets' favorite nuclear test sites was a patch of land in Semipalatinsk, Kazakhstan, called the Polygon. Even today, this area is one of the most radioactive places in the whole world. It's been hit with about 450 nuclear explosions, and with every single one, masses of radioactive dust and dirt were thrown into the air and carried across the neighboring communities as toxic fallout. A test in 1956 resulted in over 600 residents of the city of Ust-Kamenogorsk being rushed to hospital with radiation sickness, and they were 250 miles away. Now, trust me, you don't want to get radiation sickness. If you're ever subjected to a strong dose of radiation, the symptoms can be severe and quick to set in. The invisible rays penetrate your body, so they don't just damage your skin, but also your insides. The cells that make your hair die off, causing you to lose it. Your disease-fighting white blood cells die too, crippling your immune system. Even your very DNA is attacked, causing it to break and mutate. You'll feel sick, weak, and disoriented, even if you survive the initial dose of radiation. Years later, you're more likely to develop life-threatening illnesses like leukemia or cancer. That's exactly what happened with the many residents of Ust-Kamenogorsk. But the tests didn't just affect one generation of people. Because DNA mutations are often passed on, pregnant women at the time were more likely to give birth to children with learning difficulties or physical impairments. Overall, the tests in Semipalatinsk alone are estimated to have affected over 350,000 people across 3 generations. Jeez. But what actually is it that makes these monstrous weapons so preposterously powerful? How did we go from conventional bombs to colossal weapons of mass destruction in the space of just a few years? To find out, we need to return to our German scientist Otto Hahn back in 1938. You see, he didn't just discover nuclear energy. He discovered something called nuclear fission, and it's the entire reason that we're now capable of our own Armageddon. Okay, so here's the sitch. Everything in the universe is made of atoms. You, me, the chair you're sat on, even your grand's false teeth. They're so small you can't even see them with a microscope, but they're everywhere. Inside every atom is a nucleus containing a load of protons, which are positively charged, and neutrons, which have no charge. These are bound together tightly to the nucleus, which takes a great deal of energy to keep together, because naturally things that have the same charge repel one another. Think about magnets. If you try to push 2 magnets together positive to positive, there's resistance. If you let go of those magnets, they'd spring backwards, releasing kinetic energy as they did so. It's the same principle here. The protons are held together by a powerful force, but if that force is broken, all the energy being contained by it is released. This process is called nuclear fission, and it's the principle behind both the Hiroshima and Nagasaki atom bombs. To instigate fission, a neutron is fired at the nucleus of an atom. When it hits the nucleus, it smashes it apart, forming 2 smaller nuclei and releasing energy in the form of heat. At the same time, some neutrons are flung from the nuclei entirely and go on to hit other atoms, splitting their nuclei and creating a chain reaction. In this way, a massive amount of heat energy is produced that increases exponentially in just a fraction of a second, and it's all reliant on reactions in the nucleus. Nucleus, nuclear, get it? It's the basic process that powers all nuclear weapons, and most nuclear power plants use it to generate electricity too. However, just to throw a spanner in the works, there is another way of creating nuclear energy, called nuclear fusion. This is much more powerful than fission and is used to power hydrogen bombs. Here, instead of splitting atoms apart, they're fused together. Fusion only works with small atoms, like hydrogen, the nucleus of which contains just 1 proton. Naturally, 2 hydrogen atoms repel one another because they're both positively charged. But if the force repelling them is overcome, and they're impelled to fuse with one another, creating a bigger atom and releasing a huge amount of energy in the process. So, how do you overcome the powerful force repelling the atoms and fuse them together? Well, you need to compress them into as small a space as you can so they're more likely to collide, and blast them with an absolute butt-ton of heat. This way, they're not only closer to one another, but the heat makes them move faster. And when I say a butt-ton of heat, I mean at least 180 million degrees Fahrenheit. Ooh, spicy. For comparison, that's almost 7 times hotter than the sun.
So again, it's lucky, this is how hot these missiles are going to be, 100 million degrees Celsius, they're going to burn hotter than the sun, as he said, that's extreme heat, this is a very serious thing, that's going to take place.
Which also runs off nuclear fusion. Because of the immense gravitational pressures at the sun's core, about 200 billion times greater than the atmospheric pressure here on Earth, atoms are crushed so close together that it doesn't need to be so hot for fusion to occur. On Earth, however, we need to make up for the lack of pressure by ramping up the heat. And you know what generates a lot of heat? Yeah, nuclear fission. Therefore, hydrogen bombs, otherwise known as thermonuclear weapons, explode using the heat from a fission reaction to kickstart a more powerful fusion reaction. In other words, when a hydrogen bomb goes off, it burns 7 times hotter than the sun. Whew! Okay, if you're with me so far, give yourself a pat on the back. Now we know the basic reaction powering the bombs, but how do the bombs themselves actually work? Let's start with the fuel inside them, which is either uranium-235 or plutonium-239. These are both radioactive metals, meaning their atoms have unstable nuclei. An unstable nucleus has too many neutrons or protons inside it and will eject them to try and become stable. This is called radioactive decay, and it produces energy in the form of radiation. Atoms with unstable nuclei are also easier to split with nuclear fission, hence why they're used in nuclear weapons. Now, Little Boy's design was very simple. The bomb had 2 separate pieces of uranium-235 inside it, the plug and the target. Upon detonation, several thousand pounds of conventional explosive was set off inside the shell, which fired the plug down a barrel and onto the target. The 2 pieces of uranium smashed together, compressing the atoms close enough to instigate a fission reaction, which grew in power exponentially until it exploded out from the bomb's shell in a fearsome fireball. All nuclear weapons produce this fireball, and it expands so fast that in a 1 megaton hydrogen bomb, which is far more powerful than Little Boy was, it can reach 440 feet across in less than a millisecond. You see, Little Boy was actually pretty inefficient, which is why nobody ever made any bigger, more powerful versions of the weapon. Fat Man, the bomb dropped on Nagasaki, had a very different design. Instead of uranium-235, Fat Man was powered by plutonium-239. However, the plutonium-239 used had trace amounts of plutonium-240 in it. This is a different kind of plutonium, called an isotope. Plutonium-240 has a higher fission rate than plutonium-239, which means if the same gun-type design as Little Boy was used, it would have begun fission before the 2 masses of plutonium had been brought together. This would have made it so inefficient, it wouldn't have been worth using. So another design was thought up. For Fat Man, 1 plutonium sphere was held in the center of the bomb. Around this, a layer of uranium was placed. This layer of uranium held the plutonium in place and helped reflect neutrons back to the core, improving the efficiency of the fission reaction. Blocks of conventional explosives were then precisely placed around this to produce a symmetrical implosion when activated, which would compress the plutonium sphere. Once compressed, a device inside the plutonium was crushed and injected neutrons into the radioactive metal, kickstarting the fission reaction and setting off the nuke. But there's one more thing that needed to be considered for both bombs: how the detonation would be triggered in the first place. Impact with the ground would have done the trick, but the ground would also have absorbed a lot of the explosion and limited its radius. Instead, for maximum destructive potential, the bombs had to be detonated in the air. To do this, both were equipped with specialized circuitry that could detect their height from the ground and detonate at just the right moment. As well as affecting more area, an aerial explosion sends out a shockwave that smashes into the ground, rebounds, and then combines with the initial blast to form an even bigger shockwave. So the crews of the planes dropping the bombs really had to skedaddle fast. Well, in the modern world, we don't have to drop these deadly destroyers from planes anymore. We can fire them straight into the air on automated missiles. Ballistic missiles are about 20 times faster than traditional bombers and can carry hydrogen-powered nuclear warheads far deadlier than the atom bombs dropped on Japan. Luckily, we've also got some pretty nifty anti-missile defense systems.
My dad. You know. And then, before I continue, I'm going to bring out the book of Jeremiah, chapter 51, and verse 1. And it says, "Thus saith the Lord, Behold, I will raise up against Babylon and against them that dwell in the midst of them that rise up against me a destroying wind, and will send fanners unto Babylon that shall fan her and shall empty her land. For in the day of trouble they shall be against her round about, and against them, it's like you, against him that bendeth, let the archer bend his bow, and against him that lifteth up himself in his brigading, and spare ye not her young men, destroy ye utterly all her hosts." So yes, again, that destroying wind is going into, the damage. Again, he somewhat explained it, once these weapons are detonated, it creates a huge shockwave, then pretty much that shockwave destroys whatever is in its path, It's that destroying wind.
So which countries have nukes today? Any guesses who has the most? Because of how secretive the world's governments are about their nuclear stockpiles, we can't be 100% sure on the exact figures. But as of 2021 estimates, Russia has the most nukes with a world-ending 6,255. Hot on their heels, in second place, we have the USA with a considerable 5,550. The other 7 nuclear-capable nations have a lot less, with North Korea owning the least, somewhere between 40 and 50. And though 40 nukes doesn't sound like much compared to over 6,000, that's still enough firepower to completely wipe New York City off the map, and then some. Which makes me wonder, what would it be like if the unthinkable happened and the world really did descend into full-blown nuclear warfare? As a global community, we're currently sat on over 13,000 nuclear warheads. However, this number is a little misleading. Due to disarmament efforts, only 3,000 to 4,000 are actually active, and the rest are decommissioned. This is
All of these nuclear weapons are going to be used during World War III. None of these weapons are going to be spared. They're all going to be used at the same time.
relatively low compared with 1986, when the total number of active warheads hit a whopping world high of 70,300. Of course, 4,000 nuclear missiles could still do a pretty hefty amount of damage. If even a tenth of them found their target, the loss of human life would be catastrophic. And not just from the explosions and radiation, from huge firestorms too. Yeah, as if nuclear weapons weren't bad enough. At Hiroshima, all the individual fires caused by the explosion amalgamated into one terrible tempest of flames. Hot air rose and created burning hurricane-strength wind that turned inward towards the fire and fanned it. This made it rage even harder, destroying everything in its path for almost 4.5 square miles before eventually dying out. One apocalyptic theory, called nuclear winter, claims that if enough bombs went off, thousands of these furious firestorms would burn their way across the globe, kicking up hundreds of millions of tons of smoke and ash as they did so. This would form a thick belt of particles encircling the northern atmosphere, plunging our world into darkness. Lack of sunlight would cause dramatic falls in temperatures and destroy much of Earth's vegetation and animal life. With crops failing, animals dying, and cities and infrastructure destroyed, surviving humans would be left in a cold, irradiated wasteland. and the dark clouds could remain for a whole decade. In other words, it wouldn't be very fun. Hold on, though. Before you go and spend your life savings on a fallout shelter and 1,000 tins of beans, you should know that we're probably not heading toward Armageddon anytime soon.
So what he just said was false, because even though this video came out, last year, we're actually pretty close to World War III. So please don't get it mistaken. This thing could happen any day now. So we're actually very close.
Mankind has possessed the power to destroy itself since the end of World War II. Despite this, no nuclear weapon has ever been used outside of a test since 1945. Why? Well, nuclear warfare doesn't benefit anyone. If one country launches a nuclear attack on another, the defending country is likely to launch a counter-nuclear attack in response, and both parties would be sent to their doom.
And that's exactly what's going to happen. Once one country launches their missiles, they're all going to launch them, at the same time, and that's going to be their response. Now, yes, various countries around the world are going to get hit by these missiles, but only one country in particular is going to be left completely desolate, and I'm going to get into that in a second.
All this mutually assured destruction, and it's not ideal. This worked pretty well during the Cold War, but today it's a bit more complex. With countries around the world developing blisteringly fast hypersonic missiles, conventional defense systems just won't cut it anymore. Not only do hypersonic missiles fly faster than a mile a second, they're also more maneuverable than their ballistic counterparts, making them supremely tough to defend against. Even so, mutually assured destruction still applies. The US, Russia, and China are all developing the technology alongside a number of other countries. Because of this, ironically, an attack is far less likely than if just one country had the power. Okay, I know that's not the most comforting thing to hear, but hey, weapons of mass destruction aren't very comforting. I guess that's why you never see any cuddly nuke toys in kids' stores. Anyway, the modern world is much more focused on using nuclear energy for constructive uses than the destructive. In fact, about 10% of the world's electricity is now nuclear. And that's a good thing. It doesn't pollute the atmosphere, and it's about 10 million times more efficient than burning fossil fuels. Nuclear research has also helped doctors in the fight against cancer, allowing them to predict the amount of radiation needed to kill tumors without damaging healthy cells. We even use radiation to kill harmful bacteria.
Okay, so you kind of going off topic. So pretty much, again, that's just, exactly how these nuclear weapons work and what they're going to be used to do. Now, again, continuing with the scriptures, I'm going to go to the book of Joel, chapter 2, and it says the terrible visitation. This is the book of Joel, chapter 2, and it says, "Blow ye the trumpet of Zion, and sound an alarm in my holy mountain. Let all the inhabitants of the land tremble, for the day of the Lord cometh, for it is nigh at hand, a day of darkness and of gloominess, a day of clouds and of thick darkness, as the morning spread upon the mountains, a great people and a strong, there hath not ever been the like." It's lucky. "Neither shall be any more after it, even to the years of many generations. A fire devoureth before them, and behind them a flame burneth. The land is as the Garden of Eden before them, and behind them a desolate wilderness. Yea, and nothing shall escape them." And again, and it's describing those missiles, Continuing. Verse 4, "The appearance of them is as the appearance of horses, and as horsemen. So shall they run. Like the noise of chariots on the top of mountains shall they leap. Like the noise of a flame of fire that devoureth the stubble. as a strong people set in battle array before their face, the people shall be much pained, all their faces shall gather blackness. And yes, when the people see these things, they're going to be terribly afraid, Even us, those of us that, endure to the end, when we see these things, it's going to be a very terrible thing to see. Because, Lord willing, we be of the elect and we make it. But to these other people that aren't going to make it, ultimately, they're watching their death, and they're only going to have, 15 to 30 minutes to do, whatever. But ultimately, that's the amount of time, it's going to take certain of these missiles, just like I featured, in the first video I did, that first clip that I featured, certain of these missiles, it'll only take them, 15 minutes at the least, 30 minutes at the most to reach its target, So that's, again, what this is describing, these missiles, Verse 7, they shall run like mighty men, they shall climb the wall like men of war. They shall march every one on his ways, they shall not break their ranks, neither shall one thrust another. They shall walk every one in his path, and when they fall upon the sword, they shall not be wounded. And again, that is also describing that these missiles, they're not going to, hit each other and detonate in the sky, Every missile that has a specific target, it's going to be the best way I can describe it, pretty much just like, it describes like in the military where, you have the soldiers marching and, everyone's in their particular rank in their particular order. It's going to be like that with those missiles, No missile is going to break its rank and, hit another one. Also, it's going into, those missile defense systems, which are going to try to stop these ICBMs, but they won't be able to. This is going to bounce right off of them, and they're going to keep going. So nothing is going to stop these weapons, Verse 9, they shall run to and fro in the city, they shall run upon the wall, they shall climb up the houses, they shall enter in at the windows like a thief. The earth shall quake before them, and the heavens shall tremble. The sun and the moon shall be dark, and the stars shall withdraw their shining. And the Lord shall utter his voice before his army, for his camp is very great, for he is strong that executeth. For he is strong that executeth his word. For the day of the Lord is very great and terrible. Who can abide it? And reality, no one. No one can abide that. No one can survive that. But, on the flip side, only the elect will be able to survive, because those are the only people that he is coming back to deliver, the elect of the nation of Israel, not these other nations. The other nations will not make it. The other nations do not matter. It's only about the nation of Israel. But in this particular time, the elect, the chosen of the chosen, So I'm going to go to the book of Joel chapter 3 and verse 2. It says, I will also gather all nations and will bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat or Yehoshaphat, and will plead with them for my people and for my heritage Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations and parted my land. And yes, during World War III, the Lord is going to gather these nations together in land of the valley of Jehoshaphat, which is, Yahweh's judgment. He's going to gather these nations together, in that land so they can fight each other, ultimately to destroy them. So that's why those that get drafted during World War III and they get sent over there, they aren't coming back. They're going to die. But ultimately, the Lord is doing this to avenge his people, starting with the elect. declare war. Wake up the mighty men. Let all the men of war draw near. Let them come up. Beat your plowshares into swords, and your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say, I am strong. Assemble yourselves and come, all ye heathen, and gather yourselves together round about. Thither cause thy mighty ones to come down, O Lord. Let the heathen be wakened and come up to the valley of Jehoshaphat, or Yehoshaphat in Hebrew, for there I will sit to judge all the heathen round about. Put ye in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe. Come, get you down, for the slacking. For the press is full, the fats overflow, for their wickedness is great. Multitudes, multitudes in the valley of decision, for the day of the Lord is near in the valley of decision. The sun and the moon shall be darkened, and the stars shall withdraw their shining. The Lord also shall roar out of Zion, and utter his voice from Jerusalem, and the heavens and the earth shall shake. But the Lord will be the hope of his people, and the strength of the children of Israel. So shall ye know that I am the Lord, your power dwelling in Zion, my holy mountain. Then shall Jerusalem be holy, and there shall no strangers pass through her anymore. So yes, once the Lord, executes his judgment upon the earth, everyone, for generations, for generations, for generations, forever, they're gonna know that the Lord did this, they're gonna know. It's gonna be known the Lord is gonna exalt, or better yet, I'm gonna rephrase that, the names, starting with the Most High, the names Yahweh, Yahweh Shai are gonna be exalted in the earth yet again, because the world, ultimately forgot that the Lord, our Lord Yahweh, the Heavenly Father, flooded this entire earth, That was the first death, He destroyed the entire earth out with water, and He made that covenant with Noah, with the rainbow that, He would never destroy the earth with water again. But it's also a twofold thing, because the rainbow is shaped like an arc, or an arch, and again, just like those missiles, that's pretty much what that also is symbolizing. He's going to destroy not the entire earth, but Babylon the Great with fire. Various parts of this world are going to get hit with missiles and be destroyed with fire. But only America, aka Babylon the Great, is going to be left completely desolate. So I'm going to go to the book of 2 Peter, chapter 3 and verse 10. And it says, But the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, in the which the heavens shall pass away with a great noise, and the elements shall melt with fervent heat. The earth also and the works that are therein shall be burned up. Seeing then that all these things shall be dissolved, what manner of persons ought ye to be in all holy Slakia? What manner of persons ought ye to be in all holy conversation and godliness, looking for and hastening unto the coming of the day of Yahweh, wherein the heavens, being on fire, shall be dissolved, and the elements shall melt with fervent heat? So again, this is going to be a very terrible time, we're coming into. So, those of us that are, awakened, those of us that are in this truth, that's how we have to, that we have, conduct ourselves as if, we are the Lord's people. Now, yes, we're going to go off, but ultimately, just what, like it says, what manner of persons are we to be? We shouldn't be like these people that are in the world, because these people are going to die, for their wickedness, but only a remnant will return, proclaim their nationality, and try to, know, walk that straight and narrow path to ultimately receive salvation, because then, these people of the world, they aren't going to make it. And a prime example of that is the 2/3 of the nation of Israel, you know. So this is the book of Zechariah, chapter 13, and verse 8. And it says, "And it shall come to pass that in all the land, saith the Lord, 2 parts therein shall be cut off and die, but the third shall be left therein. And I will bring the third part through the fire, and will refine them as silver is refined. And I will try them as gold is tried. They shall call on my name, and I will hear them. I will say, it is my people, and they shall say, the Lord is my power." And yes, 2/3 of the nation of Israel are going to be destroyed. They're going to be cut off because they're wicked. They refuse to repent. And ultimately, just how devastating, death, that death by those missiles is going to be, is going to be, is, Slakia, because, it's going to be extremely bad, for these people. We just pray not to receive that judgment, because again, that's a very fearful thing, So we have to fear the Lord, because just like it says, those missiles are going to be burning at 100 million degrees Celsius, So before I continue, I'm going to go into the Apocrypha. So this is the book of 2nd Esdras, chapter 9. And I'm going to start at verse 10. And it says, "For such as in their life have received benefits and have not known me, and they that have loathed my law while they yet had liberty, and when as yet had place of repentance was open unto them, understood not, but despised it, the same shall know it after death by pain." And again, that is what's going to happen to the 2/3, They're going to have to get this truth. They're going to have to become righteous, after they die ultimately, and be brought back, through the elect. So this is the book of this is the book of Zechariah, chapter 14 and verse 12. And it says, "And this shall be the plague wherewith the Lord will smite all the people that have fought against Jerusalem. Their flesh shall consume away while they stand upon their feet, and their eyes shall consume away in their holes, and their tongue shall consume away in their mouth." That's pretty much describing how hot that fire is going to be, that is ultimately going to melt. You know what I'm saying? It's going to melt these people. Exactly where they're standing, they're going to be vaporized, Then again, I'm going to go back. And then also, again, throwing this out there, again, for YouTube, this clip that I'm about to feature is for fair use purposes. Now, this, again, for those that are familiar with Terminator 2, because, again, this clip, gets brought out a lot, but it's the most vivid illustration of exactly what's going to happen to these people, this from Terminator 2 Judgment Day.
Make mornings crust easy.
Buy 4 tires and get up to $175 in savings after rebate during our huge Memorial Day sale.
again, that's exactly what's going to happen. That's how terrible it's going to be. Now, again, everything, not only our bones are going to be left, but, even people's bones are going to be melted. you know. So I'm going to come to the book of Revelation, and I'm almost done. So before this destruction takes place, this particular prophecy has to take place, And this is going into, the mark of the beast. And the mark of the beast, yet again, is not sin, And I'm going to start in the book of Revelation, chapter 13, and verse 15. And it says, "And you have power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as will not worship the image of the beast should be killed, because only the elect are going to resist, this man's mark, his device that will be implanted in the people's hands and foreheads, Verse 16, "And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. And yes, pretty much this particular prophecy has to take place before that destruction takes place, because that's ultimately going to be the judgment of those that receive this man's mark. They're going to be put to death by way of these thermonuclear missiles, So this is the book of Revelation chapter 14, and I'm going to start at verse 8. And it says, "There followed another angel saying, Babylon is fallen, that great city, because she made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication." And it says, "Doom for worshippers of the beast." Verse 9, "And the angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, If any man worship the beast and his image, and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of Yahweh, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation, and shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment ascendeth up forever and ever, and they shall have no rest, day nor night, who worship the beast and his image, and whoso receiveth the mark of his name." Slakia. So, again, that's what's going to happen. Now, this isn't talking about hell, because again, when our Lord Yahweh Shai comes back, because ultimately, the spirit of the Lord is going to be in these missiles, and our Lord Yahweh Shai is going to return, with the host of heaven, with that innumerable, amount of angels. These people are going to see the Lord. They're going to be burned to death in the presence of the Lord and the angels, because they're going to be on the earth, at that return. Because again, these nations are going to try to fight the Lord, but they're going to fail. But again, since, just to land back, off of Revelation 13, because again, I forget to bring this out as well, because I don't know how sin is going to give you this. This is the book of Revelation chapter 16 and verse 2, and it says, "And the first went and poured out his vial upon the earth, and there fell a noisome and grievous sore upon the men which had the mark of the beast, and upon them which worshipped his image." So again, how can you get a grievous sore from sin? It's telling you it's something that's going to be put in your hand or in your forehead, primarily people's hands, but for the people that are, paralyzed or paraplegic, they're going to get it in their foreheads. But still, the people that receive the mark of the beast either going to receive a grievous sore, they're going to receive a cancerous sore. So I'm going to go back again, just to go back to describe yet again exactly what these missiles are going to do. This is the book of Revelation, chapter 9, and I'm going to start at verse 15. And the 4 angels were loosed, which were prepared for an hour and a day and a month and a year to slay the third part of men. And the third part of men is Esau, Edom, because there's 3 parts. You have the sons of God, which are the Israelites, the sons of men, which are the other nations, and the sons of the wicked, which is, Esau, Edom, so-called white people, because that's ultimately who the Lord is coming back to judge, because the same people that were in power during the time when the Lord walked the earth are the same people that are in power now when he's said to make his second coming. Verse 16. And the number of the army of the horsemen were 200,000, and I heard the number of them, and thus I saw the horses in the vision, and of them that sat on them, having breastplates of fire, and of jacinth and brimstone, and the heads of the horses were as the heads of lions, and out of their mouths issued fire and smoke and brimstone. By these 3 was the third part of men killed by the fire and by the smoke and by the brimstone, which issued out of their mouths. For their power is in their mouth and in their tails, for their tails were like unto serpents, and had heads, and with them they do hurt. Yes, this is describing those ICBM missiles, how many they're going to be, and what exactly they're going to look like. Because again, when these missiles are shot, they're going to be shot. It's like they're going to be shot into space. They leave the ozone layer, get their specific target and enter back into the atmosphere, and they're going to enter back on fire, because that's how fast they're going to be traveling. So again, that's why I said they had heads like lions, and again, the tails like serpents, is that rocket system that's propelling these missiles. Yeah. Almost done. There's the book of Revelation, chapter 19, in verse 'Cause I'm going to start at Revelation 19 and verse 12. Where's lucky? I'm going to start at verse 11, and it says, the coming of Christ, which in the Hebrew will be Hamashiach. And it says, and I saw heaven open, and behold, a white horse, and he that sat upon him was called Faithful and True. And in righteousness he doth judge and make war. His eyes were as a flame of fire, and on his head were many crowns. And he had a name written that no man knew but he himself. And he was clothed with a vesture dipped in blood, and his name is called the Word of God. And the armies which were in heaven followed him upon white horses, clothed in fine linen, white and clean. Now again, this is describing our Lord Yahushua when he returns, and no, he's not actually coming back on a literal white horse. That's talking about that fathership that he's coming back on. And again, his garment, won't literally be covered in blood, but it's just also describing how many people he's going to kill when he comes back. Verse 15, out of his mouth goeth a sharp sword, with that, that with it he should smite all the nations, and shall rule them with a rod of iron, and he treadeth the winepress of the fierceness and wrath of almighty power, or Alashadja, and he hath on his vesture and on his thigh a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords, And then that sharp sword again is going into those laser beams, that are going to be shot from the chariots, that concentrated fire that's also going to be used to destroy America and these other nations as well. Verse 17, and I saw an angel standing in the sun, and he cried with a loud voice, saying to all the fowls that are, saying to all the fowls that fly in the midst of heaven, come and gather yourselves together unto the supper of the great power, that ye may eat the flesh of kings, and the flesh of captains, and the flesh of mighty men, and the flesh of horses, and of them that sit on them, and the flesh of all men, free and bond, both small and great. Now again, that's also going into how many bodies there's going to be as well. The Lord is going to feed the fowls of the air, by way of these dead bodies that are going to be, scattered all over the world. Verse 19, and I saw the beast and the kings of the earth and their armies gathered together to make war against him that sat on the horse and against his army. And again, these other nations are going to stop fighting each other to try and fight at Lord Yahweh Shai, but it's not going to work. They're going to be destroyed. Verse 20, and it says, the doom of the beast and false prophet. And the beast was taken, and with him the false prophet that wrought miracles before him, which he deceived them that had received the mark of the beast, and them that worshipped his image. These both were cast alive into a lake of fire burning with brimstone. Now again, that lake of fire is not talking about hell. There's no such thing. That's, that hell doctrine is Greek mythology. That's describing, the lake of fire is describing, America being on fire. This entire land from New York to California is going to be engulfed in flames. So I'm going to go to the book of Revelation, chapter 20. Verse 10. And it says, Revelation chapter 20 and verse 10. And it says, and the devil that deceived them was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are, and shall be tormented day and night forever and ever. Now, America isn't going to be on fire, forever, but, again, it's going to be left as an example like Sodom and Gomorrah of how not to live, of how not to run a kingdom. But that fire is going to burn for a very long time. So I'm going to jump down to verse 14 and 15. And the death, Revelation 20 and 14, and death and hell were cast into the lake of fire. This is the second death. And yes, the first death was when the Lord flooded the entire earth by way of water. And this is the second death, people that die by way of these ICBM missiles being burned alive, The lake of fire is America being engulfed in flames, And then I'm going to end it on this. And it says, and whosoever was not found, and whosoever was not found written in the book of life was cast into the lake of fire. So, whosoever, again, the other nations, they don't matter. Esau, Edom, he definitely doesn't matter, but the 2/3 of the nation of Israel, they aren't written in the book of life, they aren't going to receive salvation. So ultimately, they're going to be destroyed, but they're also going to be brought back, So, Lord willing, this lesson was edifying. I want to give all praise, honor, and glory due to Yahweh, Bahashim Yahushai, Bahashim Rakakwadash. I like to give double honors unto the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone, who our land is true from, and I like to say peace and salutations unto the hopefully elect. Till the next time I say Shalom.